And you'll notice the coil forms you're using, by the way. He's not using these styrene stuff. He's using good ones. See there? These are good bud coil forms, or something like that. Next picture, please. Oh, when he got this far, he said, well, I got to have a cabinet. Well, I'm going to build my cabinet. He built his own cabinet. And out of angle and sheet aluminum. It's starting to look like a receiver now. Next picture. This is with the lid open. You can see the angle he used. Next picture. I think you missed one. No, you didn't. All right, this is all right. Okay, let's get into this next one. This is a project that came my way. I got a letter from a guy in California, and he said, I've got all the parts for an HBR receiver, and I read this, all the parts, okay. And he says, you can have them all for the postage because my eyesight isn't good enough, I can't work on this anymore. And he said, I in turn got them from a guy, Sam, who's now a silent key. So I said, okay, send them on. Well, it cost about 40 bucks in postage. There was no power transformer, no coil forms, but there was a cabinet and there was a panel. And I said, okay, here's a good start. And some of the other parts were in there. A couple of these were in there. These are the little wire-wound pots. But other than that, oh, they had the tuning capacitor. And so I said, okay, that's a good start. And he had the other crystal too. He had the two crystals. So I said, okay. So I put the thing aside. In fact, Mark was there at the house the day we took all the parts out of the box, the shipping box, and started sorting through them and seeing what we had and didn't have. So,
that was fun.
Say again?
That was fun. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. One of the prizes of that package, though, was a great big thick notebook with all of the literature, a lot of it unpublished, mimeograph stuff that had come from Ted Crosby himself, and telling how to do things and how to get all the coils adjusted, all the rest of it. And on this, I think you'll notice something missing. There's no power supply here. I have room for it, barely. And then I thought, this is not the way to do it with this type of thing. I'm not going to build this power supply. I've already got one that's a separate power supply, and I'll just use an external power supply like an HRO, and I don't have to do that, and I won't have the complication of loop currents and all the rest of it. So, coil forms, I had these from my accumulated stock over the years in Hamfest. When I see these things, I pick them up because I knew this is what was used in this receiver. Actually, I ended up with 4, 5, and 6 pinners. So that's the way I'm going to do it, 4, 5, and 6, so they don't get them mixed up. This is a little too small, and I did a lot of cardboard templating. The other thing I did was, if you'll notice, let's look under here. You may find it hard to see, but the guy said, he says, I've got a chassis that's all drilled and cut and everything else, so it's all done. Well, I took one look at this. It was not a good job. The parts were not where I wanted them. And so I just chopped the whole chassis top out and put a sheet of aluminum in and fastened it down with 440 screws and nuts and painted it. It looks pretty good now. This particular shielding is made out of flashing aluminum. It's not terribly strong, but it'll do the job. This is the BFO. There's your low frequency IFs. These are high frequency IFs, and so forth. The tuning capacitor is made in England. It's a real fancy one. It was in the box. I said, okay, I'll use it. And of course, I had to get all these pots underneath lined up so they fit. And I have these cute little switches. And again, the dial that came, this is an Eddystone dial. Eddystone made some doggone good dials. So keep your eyes open for these if you're going to build any project that uses a dial with good readout and very low backlash. Next picture, please. All right. In this particular picture, one of the IFs I left out because I wanted to show how I mounted these things. instead of cutting slots and all that, I said, okay, I'll just drill holes in this one. And I went ahead and drilled a bunch of holes. I mounted the IFs up above the chassis by about 1/8 of an inch, and ran insulating tubing over the lugs that go through. And, you know, I think it's going to work all right. When I say think it's going to work all right, mainly because, as I say here, this is still a work in progress. So I have a disclaimer on the lid of this thing. Let's talk about the test equipment. You don't need a lot of fancy test equipment. Out in the lot today, I saw all the test equipment you would need to do this receiver, assuming it was working. You need a VTVM, you need a grid dip oscillator, or 2 or 3 of those out there. Wire, of course, you can get that, that's not hard. You can get that in an electric motor shop, for goodness sake. Or even Radio Shack may still have some. Signal generator, audio generator for the 1200 KCIFs, in case you don't, oh wait a minute. That's wrong. Signal generator, you should be able to get 1200 KC, or whatever frequency you're using, 1700, whatever it is. The 100 KC, though, I found to be tricky. At 85 KC, most signal generators didn't have it. So one day it dawned on me, hey, an audio generator creates the same kind of sine wave. For what I need, I just put an audio generator on. I was able to peak some 85 KC IS very nicely. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but it worked for me. If you can get a cheap frequency counter from one of the supply stores, that's helpful too. Q meter is a nice thing to have, but you don't need it. Okay, next picture, please. This is another shot of the IF laying out there before I mounted it. It is now all mounted. Okay, next one, please. This is a guy out in Wisconsin. He sent me some information. He sent me these pictures. This is an HBR that he inherited from his dad's estate. His dad was in some kind of an automotive business, so apparently he was working on a car that required green paint. So he painted the cabinet green, and he chrome plated the front panel. And then he wound the coils, and so on. And that's an Eddystone dial there. Next one. This is a HBR that I picked up from an estate down in New Mexico. I run across this guy, and he said, yeah, he said, I'll sell it to you, $100, including the power supply. Well, I got the thing. There was one set of coils plugged in, and no other coils. Oh, boy. So, it means I got to wind the coils. Well, all right, I've done that before. The interesting thing was, later on, these extra coils showed up on eBay, a separate listing. So that sort of irked me a little bit. Notice the separate power supply down below. It's a well-built supply. And this particular radio is very well built. The only problem is that underneath it, he's got all kinds of circuit boards with all kinds of resistors and capacitors and wires all over the place, and there's no paperwork. I have no idea what the circuit diagram is. Next picture, please. Now this is the one I took out to the Military Radio Collectors Association semi-annual meet in Gilbert, Pennsylvania, which happens to be in Monroe County, our home county. And I took one of these out just for show and tell. I put it on the table and people were looking at it. Some of the people knew exactly what it was. And Breck Smith took one look at it, and this is what inspired him to build his own. This one uses a PW dial. Again, this was an estate thing, the same estate that I got the previous item from. Go ahead, Mark, next one. This is the back of the one with the PW dial. I see a lot of plates in there covering holes, so I have a feeling that what he did was change things. But you'll notice the classic configuration of the coils. So again, dead giveaway. Next picture. This is underneath the one that Breck is working on. Or wait a minute, which one? No, I think this is underneath the one of the one from the estate. Yes, this is the one from the estate. They took the mounting sockets out of the old command receiver and carefully peened them into place in this particular one. Next one, please. This is the receiver that I built back in the early 70s in HBR. And I thought, boy, I'm going to do a good job on this. And I did a pretty good job. But, you know, looking at this with a critical eye nowadays, I can see some of the mistakes I made. But it worked. And I wound all the coils and so forth. Next one, please.
Can you go back and list the mistake?
I'm sorry, say?
Can you go back and list any mistake, maybe the placement of something? Is that
Go back one, Mark.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right there.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, you said that you made some mistakes. Were they placement of particular placement of IFs or things like that?
What I did, I overreached myself and I put in audio-driven AGC without really understanding the circuit. That's number one. Number two, I used these doggone Black Beauty capacitors. And, you know, at that time I had no idea what I was getting into. So that has to be changed out. At the time the thing worked. In fact, you can see up there one of these plastic encased capacitors, which, right there, see it? It may or may not be good. But, you know, I can easily test it, I just haven't done it. But I knew a guy that had a sheet metal shop, and he let me go in evenings and use his tools, and I bought the metal from him. I even made the cabinet for this thing. I thought this was great. At any rate, next picture, please. I have 5 of these things now, plus a half. So I have to wire this thing up and test it and so on. So I've got 5.5 HBRs. This is a picture signed by Ted Crosby, sent to a fellow. And this picture was shown in QST somewhere along the line without the a note up in the corner, but he had a bunch of these prints made and he sent them out to people. Next one, please. And this is the top view of his. Now, this was built on a very small chassis, and notice that power transformer. It's sort of hanging over the edge there. And this is one reason I decided not to do it. You'll notice the rectifier tube and the electrolytic capacitor, they take a lot of space right there. So I went for a separate power supply. But you'll notice too, the classic configuration of the front end right there. No, dead giveaway. People are still building these. There's a gentleman in this audience who was told me yesterday that he had already collected a whole bunch of parts and wants to build one. And there's always guys on the website who are talking about building these things and so forth. Again, the follow-up information, it's very key. Again, you can do it. It's not that hard. You do one stage at a time. It's not that difficult, but you have to follow certain procedures. That's it.